State legislators have been putting a spotlight on the financial burden of higher education, along with cost increases at public colleges. The burden is sometimes even more serious at private schools, which are among the leaders for defaults on student loans. One of our guests recently got help from a nonprofit that's trying to help students with debt problems, the Crittendon Women's Union. We'd like to welcome Sharon Pam, and also with us is the co-chair of the Joint Committee on Higher Education, State Representative Tom Sannicandro. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Thank you. Thanks.
I'll start with Sharon Pam. You had experience at one of these private institutions.
Yes.
What went wrong?
Basically, I finished my 1,000 hours, and then when I had a fire in my apartment, a week later, they told me not to return. After I had already taken out a loan, which was co-signed by my mother. They took the $3,000 and just told me not to come back.
So how did that set you back? I mean, some people might say $3,000, you know, hey, you put it behind you, but, you know, it's not easy for everybody.
No, it's not. When you don't have a job and you don't have a GED, then you really are basically unemployable. No one's really going to give you a job, especially in the field that you had a passion for.
And your field was, what passion was for that?
Hairdressing.
Right. By the way, if you felt that you were not treated fairly, what did you do about it?
Well, basically, I was young, so I didn't think there was anything I could do. They sent me letters from lawyers, and after I received those letters, I just did whatever they told me to do.
Tom Sannicandro, this must be something that happens to a lot of people. Maybe some of them have called you?
Yeah, well, we know statistically 10% of the students in the country attend these, what we call proprietary schools, and they're essentially the for-profit schools. Of the 10% that they make up in the whole student body, they account for 40% of the student loan defaults. So we know there's really a problem somewhere in this sector, and that's what we're trying to address. And what we're talking about is the for-profit schools. We're not talking about private universities like Tufts and those types of things. We're talking about schools that are out there to make a profit. They're actually profit enterprises, and that's where we're seeing the problem. Not all those schools are bad, but we know that there's a trend and there's some problems there that we're trying to address.
Now, sometimes even nonprofit institutions try to milk the reimbursement pipeline, but what is it about these schools you think that makes them different?
Well, we had a hearing recently at the State House to hear from students in Massachusetts and what had happened to them. And really what we're looking at is we're looking at problems with recruitment practices where they actually bring these students in knowing they're not going to be successful, have them sign documents, have them sign student loan statements, and then before the student knows that they're enrolled and they have all this debt. What we see is that sometimes these schools do not adequately prepare these students for any profession at all. And also we see that sometimes these schools close and then the student has no recourse. One of the real problems that happens is if they have a federal student loan or a guaranteed student loan, that once they don't pay that back, they're not eligible to go to school anymore until that default is made. So that creates sort of a lasting problem for these students.
Now, Sharon, you went to a school, you had to pay them back some money. What was the missing piece there that prevented you from being in a position to pay back the money?
Well, if I was to work, all my money would be garnished, because basically I would owe the federal government. They would just find a way to just take your money, and you couldn't even pay back the loan. If I did work to do, unearned income, because I have a child. So that's what I would have done, but there was no way for me to be able to pay back.
Of course, it's the school's job to prepare you for the next step. How would you rate them on that?
I give them a 0. They didn't prepare you at all for anything. And even when I went back to speak to people there about helping me to get back in, after they got your money, they really didn't want to be bothered.
Representative, tell me about what you can do about it. You've got a bill, the governor's trying to work on something.
Yeah, there's 2 bills out there. One is a bill that I filed, which is to create a commission to look at this and just to get people from the schools, from private universities, from public universities, get people that are involved in the school, students, to get together and say, what do we do to look at the potential problem here and how do we address it, and propose legislation for us to do that. The other piece of legislation the governor has already filed, and that is to move these schools in Massachusetts, the schools that are non-degree granting would be like barber schools, cosmetology, massage, all those types of things, to fall into consumer protection rather than the Department of Education in Massachusetts. the reason for that is that the consumer protection arm of the government has a lot more control as far as power to get things done. Because what we're seeing is many students like Sharon that have no recourse, and the Department of Education really doesn't have the resources to look at these things, and then the legal ability to actually cause these schools to do something.
Without CWU, I wouldn't have been able to get any help to go back to college. They actually ended up through Deanne Lunan, who's a lawyer who worked on my behalf. She basically got my credit cleaned up to the point where I'm not on default. I actually have a deferment. So that's why now I'm at Quincy College.
It also seems, Representative, that you got to do some things to help students get themselves disentangled, as Sharon just spoke about. Are the resources there to help them do that, you think?
They're not, actually, and that's one of the things that I've learned, that there really isn't any resources, and there really isn't the legal framework for them to get out of it, because once you take these federal loans out, what Sharon's saying is that they can actually garnish your tax return. They can go in because they have the power of the federal government. So even if you were not given the education, or the school was intentionally fraudulently got you in and didn't educate you at all and threw you out, or the school closed, you're still stuck with that loan that you have nothing you can do about but pay it back. So even if you didn't get anything for the services, you're still obligated under the loan, and those are the types of issues that we're trying to address.
Well, why would consumer protection be a better watchdog? Wouldn't that still be a kind of a reactive watchdog?
That was the governor's bill, and I think it's not addressing the underlying problem. You're right, but it is addressing some of the immediate concerns we have right now in Massachusetts. So that's what that does. The other piece, the commission, is really to take a long look at this. I think one of the things is for folks watching at home that are considering these types of for-profit schools is to actually look at the community colleges, because most of the time what they're looking at these for-profit schools, the Commonwealth already offers at community colleges at probably a quarter of the cost with a whole lot more support. So, you know, if there's any message from people watching, it's look to the community college. If you're looking for any of these services, massage therapy, you know, anything, they're offering at the community colleges.
Sharon, if you were to roll things back to that moment when you made the decision to go to one of these for-profit schools, what would your advice be to folks in the future who are at that same juncture? I
definitely would go to college. My first semester at Quincy is the best ever. You get help, tutoring, anything that you need, they do it. And I actually got a grant, so I don't have to pay back any money for my semester of school.
Sounds like a better deal. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for being with us. Sharon Pam and Tom Sannicandro. Up in a moment, we'll have more news.